I think we are live now. I think that we are at the live podcast, which the women have taken over this year. So in honor of International Women's Day, Dom Robinson and team have given us smart ladies a chance to speak our minds. But let's all introduce ourselves. I'm Peggy Dau. I'm an independent consultant. I work with lots of media tech companies across the media sector, most of them in streaming, some of them elsewhere. But yeah, I've been around streaming media for quite a while. Olga, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I am Olga Kornienko. I am the co-founder and COO of EasyDRM. We are a hosted hosted DRM company, and we have been around for almost close to 20 years as well.
Nice. Tricia?
Hi, my name is Tricia Iboshi, and I'm the CEO of Videon. And Videon is at the forefront of video edge computing at the video source. We're changing the way live video workflows function. Nice to be here, Peggy.
Thank you for joining us. And Christy.
Hi, thanks. I'm Christy Martin, principal at iBox Systems. We provide technology services specializing in video metadata for both traditional pay TV and streaming media and how they coexist together in the different consumer interfaces. So everything from title management to SEO like tuning of the metadata and automated metadata validation and measurement. So I tend to hang out on the publishing side of the world these days. And I'm really happy to be here with you all. Thank you.
I think it's great. And I think that as we were all kind of gathering together to, make sure we all were all online before this call, we're kind of talking about like streaming and how streaming has evolved. And I know that we don't want to date ourselves, but streaming has been around since the internet's been around, basically, because it was a new distribution model and everything. And things keep changing, things keep evolving. Like, just what are some of the things that excite you today about what's going on in streaming? Tricia, why don't you take that from us, from your perspective?
It's really exciting. I mean, as many of you would know, from the early days to where we are now, I mean, everybody's streaming. The quality is there. The business models are there. The content is there. I mean, obviously there's a lot of innovation and work to be done and more things we can do. But I mean, we remember when, it didn't look good, so, right. So this is an exciting time when a lot of things have come together, there was a time when the technology was starting to get there, but the business model wasn't there. The advertising wasn't quite there yet, and the subscriptions were just building. So this is a moment in time when a lot of things have come together. And now we can really have fun with it. Now we can really start to do more. I would imagine, Christy, you see this a lot, way more interesting things now around video because the technology, the business models, and creators and usage is finally there. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think we often forget in the streaming sector, so many of us are kind of focused on that distribution aspect of streaming, but streaming is impacting everything even up to the creation end of this model. And Christy, from your perspective, you actually have your company and what you do and where your knowledge base is around something that's hypercritical in the capture and then in the ongoing distribution and consumption, which is around the metadata.
Yeah, it is not sexy, but it is really critical. I think, like Tricia said, we're finally over the hump where there is so much really high quality video available, and you're seeing it available from multiple paths from the same content provider. So if you look at any of the major media companies, they have traditional pay TV, they have TV everywhere where it's still using your cable subscription, but it's available through an app, direct to consumer applications now where you subscribe directly with the content provider. So there's just this ocean of content, not to mention all of the user contributed and new types of video. And the part I'm really excited about is how we continue to evolve how you find and manage that content and the experiences of, you have all of this content out there and it's getting much better, but how do you navigate that? Voice search and metadata is really at the heart of all of that, of how do you describe in new ways. We've got all of these new technologies and we're still displaying content in drama as the genre. And so, you know, looking at ways that becomes a much more natural and programmed entertainment experience just as much as the content once you get in there.
I've seen that noted actually. So I think we all know about recommendation search discovery has been to some extent a black hole in the streaming sector. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude or nasty or anything like that, but it's just now you have a lot of silos now with all the different services that we subscribe to, and trying to find content across all those services. So do you have a subscription? Do you not have a subscription? But just where is it? You know, holistic search is very difficult. But then there's that element which Olga can speak to, which is about the security of that. And does that become, so I'm just wondering, does that become a blocker? So you have the metadata, and we also know it's about the services themselves, whether they want to open up access to what their metadata is and things like that. So that's the silos. But then there's the security element of it as well. Like, because we all know that we're all sharing passwords.
No, we're not. Come on.
No.
No, it's actually interesting because with the security, it gives you a lot of flexibility, I think, of what you can do. And talking from, you know, a more negative side of saying the piracy and the prevention of piracy, from that perspective, we've looked into why people pirate. And I think one of the interesting things is that we actually did a survey, and what we came across is that people as humans, as consumers of content, want to consume content in ways of A, B, and C, but we as companies want to serve it up in C, D, and Q. And even certain things like watermarking, geo-blocking, people complain about the fact that why am I traveling and I can't see my content because I'm abroad and the rights are different and whatnot. But on the flip side, you get companies who are like, oh no, we have to geo-block this for various rules, you know, contracts and whatnot. And I think having appropriate security should give us the flexibility to kind of take a look and say, hey, consumers want to do this. So why don't we give them the freedom to do that? And if you protect your content flexibly and not attach any sort of business model to it, you can change that on the fly. And it's a very interesting concept to think about.
That is very, very interesting to think about, because to some extent, I feel like the streaming sector has evolved based on consumer demand for flexibility. It was ease of access, you know, because it was coming across the internet. As the streaming services, you know, evolved, they said, okay, we're not going to force you into a 12-month subscription. It's a monthly subscription. It's going to be at a reasonable cost per month. So to some extent, I feel like consumers drove the adoption of some of those business models, but yet we still do have these challenges around finding what you want to watch and then watching it where and on whatever device you want to watch it, which touches the security aspect of a little bit. How do you think do you think the consumers will be able to have the same level of influence in forcing that kind of a change? Just a general question.
I think because if you go back to our survey, there were a lot of things that people said, well, I want to pick the content I want to watch. So let's just pick on Netflix for 2 seconds. If I wanted to watch Stranger Things and that's all I wanted to watch, why do I have to pay a subscription? Why wouldn't Netflix just let me rent those specific videos or this whole series or whatever? And I think certain things like this, or if I'm traveling abroad and I am a US, resident based on my bill, and my bill says, I live in New York, why can't I view the content I should be able to view in New York while I'm in Great Britain or, pick any other country. So I think certain things like that should kind of have flexibility. And if consumers keep pushing for that, then might actually change. I don't know.
Right. It's also interesting because we're in a big period of experimentation right now too, where people are testing it out. And where do you find that balance of, for a long time it was cries for a la carte, but then it starts getting really expensive. It's like, I always joke about your room service menu. You can order toast and juice and eggs and things, but it might just be cheaper to order the breakfast. And so I think having that kind of flexibility that Olga's talking about in the rights management and the underlying tech that can test things and try it out and do consumers really like it is critical. And then not having to rip out your underlying tech when you decide your business model has evolved. So I think some of the stuff you guys are doing around that rights management is really exciting and critical to the experiences that can be built on top of that and the business models.
Right.
Yeah, and having services in the cloud and in a situation where you can change things pretty quickly and pretty easily without having to rebuild your whole infrastructure kind of makes things, gives you more flexibility and freedom to test the business model, see if it works, see if it fails, because it's not a huge expense to it if it fails, and if it succeeds, great, let's just keep pushing it out.
So I think one of the interesting things that you guys just said was about that underlying infrastructure. And we've kind of talked about this as a group about it's like the infrastructure that enables streaming is complicated from start to finish. There's lots of different pieces have to plug into other different pieces. And how do we make that simpler? Or I don't like the word future-proof because I think it's a fallacy. Maybe future facing, like that you're at least looking forward and trying to think about what's going to change or how do you change. So is it all down to open standards, or is it something else? Is it, Tricia, you've talked about smart workflows.
Yeah, how we look at it is we are definitely part of the infrastructure. So we like to make things, we not only like to comply with standards and protocols that are generally adopted, but have an architecture so that it's pretty open. There's a developer tool, so you can build what you want, and it's very extensible with the APIs, and that's the way things have to be built so that you can adjust and support different technologies and integrations as you move along. Because we do see pretty quickly, you may have this video workflow today, but we hear about sports betting, or we hear about more personalization and more video feeds than ever before, and different kinds of advertising and subscription services. And we need to be able to adjust quickly to support that. So it's really the way that it's your core architecture, how it's built, and the way you need to support marketplaces and plugins and just be extensible and be able to adjust. Like everything has to be built that way. And if it's not, then you call it future-proof, or just call it the ability to adapt later.
I like that, adapt later. That's good for me.
Right.
So when you think about what your company does and where the business is going, because you're really in an area where there's a lot of rapid change going on right now, like live streaming is just growing by leaps and bounds. And I feel like it's going to push the boundaries of on-demand streaming. There's different expectations from the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, live streaming is it's definitely a little hard, right? Because you have different environments. Now people are live streaming. We have projects where we're live streaming from a vehicle, so it's in motion and it's picking up live video from a drone. Okay, that's, there's a lot of things that need to come into play in order to support that with a level of high quality, reliability, things like that. And then you have all those remote productions. Again, you have environments you have to deal with. So how much bandwidth? I remember we did a deal a long time ago, another company, and like Lionel Richie's house didn't have enough bandwidth. So,
oh, wow.
Like, how do you fix that? So, there are a lot of on the ground things that a lot of producers and operators need to deal with. Right. So there's all this beautiful stuff in the cloud. That's great. And you can move things kind of quickly and adjust. But if you're pulling in live video from all these different physical locations, they have certain things you got to deal with.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated little world that we live in, but it is just exploding. We get the calls now where people say, I want to turn on 800 cameras so I can pick up every kind of feed possible. And then I'll decide what I want to do with them. Right. Because I can use all this metadata to decide which angle was the best one or what happened at that real time. And that is an operationally difficult thing to do. So, you know, it's an exciting time around live video, but it is complicated because there's a lot of pieces that have to come together. But
I'm even thinking about, so let's just think about like a live concert, right? So, I mean, they are coming back. There will be live concerts this year. They've been announcing some here in the New York area, and it's kind of fun to listen to them kind of hype them again, right? Because we haven't really heard them hyped for a couple of years. And I think that the whole live concert experience for those people who can't go, that would be willing to pay for the live feed, is going to be an interesting arena. And I think this touches on everything that we all do here in terms of like, okay, how many different camera angles am I going to have? What metadata am I collecting about what's being viewed and where it's being viewed from, who's on stage or who's in the audience or who's, you know, is it dusk, is it night, is it daylight, whatever the case may be. And then what are the rights associated with all of this content, which Olga's going to protect personally, of course. It's really a whole new world. And we've talked about, the industry's been talking about, you know, like immersive experiences. And I think live and where live streaming is going to go is maybe that next level of immersive experience without getting into the metaverse. That's a whole other conversation to me, right? But there's something about making these, how you enjoy a live event virtually, or even there in person. I mean, because we all have these devices, right, with us all the time. Is there something that's going to happen here that's going to augment what's going on?
I think it's interesting because like a lot of, from, you know, we've all experienced conferences that have been virtual for a really long time. And now that people are starting to venture out, a lot of conferences are going hybrid. So I'm actually very curious if concert venues and artists and whatnot would actually want to do hybrid concerts. And I can, you know, my brain all of a sudden starts saying, well, you know, you have to geo-block it and you have to do this and the other thing. But at the end of the day, I'm curious if that is something that's going to come out of this, because I can't go to a concert for various reasons, or just didn't get the tickets or whatever, but I would love to see a feed. And then the other part of my brain goes, well, I'm curious what's going to happen, because, you know, all sorts of people go to a concert and then live stream a song for their friends. And how would that compete with an actual live stream? And would there have to be a limitation, you know, blah, 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 and all of that kind of interesting stuff. But I'm curious if that was going to, the hybridness of our world is going to persist or not.
Yeah. I mean, I could foresee, go ahead.
I was just, go Tricia. We all have something on this.
You go, Kristen, you go.
Oh gosh. Okay. I was just going to say that I think it's also, when you look at live, there's a whole like temporal range of a live event too. So you can have the actual live event, and maybe that the scarcity model makes those live tickets more valuable, but then you can repackage it for people to stream after the event or augment it. And, you know, some of the stuff we saw with the Olympics too, where you have the excitement around actual live, but that content can be really valuable for a small window or even a long window around it. So I think that's really exciting too, is figuring out how we take that same event, all the camera angles Tricia mentioned, and package them up to really get the maximum value on the different physical and virtual experiences.
And what you can do in a stadium or a venue is different than what you could do at home, right? Versus in like maybe Oculus. Right.
Which Olga has to explain her experience with Oculus.
So we're moving that way. So going back to the point about just the evolving tech. So we'll start with someone just wants to live stream this camera, you know, to a user, to some video player, right? But then they get into, oh, well, we have the digital signage, but we also have mobile phones, and maybe this person wants to just watch that guitar player, and maybe you want to grab some NFTs while you're at it. You know, maybe you want to do that while you're there. Like and then maybe there's a multi-viewer where you can see different angles, like the NFL. And again, there was different technology and infrastructure in the stadium versus what you can do in kind of an OTT platform. And it's really, it's exciting for us because it's a huge growth opportunity because we're open and extensible. So we can support all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it takes great product managers, right? It takes a great product manager that says, what are the different user experiences I want to create today, tomorrow, and the next day? And they're always talking to us about what's technically possible and what's financially affordable, like what makes sense. Because just because we say this would be cool, does it financially make sense? Can they operationalize it? So there's just a lot of coordination between product managers, product marketers, CTOs, and everybody to make this all make sense. But you also see some companies that can move really quickly because they own the venue, they have innovative people in-house and they can move quickly, and they're the ones that are going to kind of drive, I think, a lot of this innovation, which will then impact end users, and then end users will expect it in other places. Right?
I think that's really interesting.
You know, and it's funny, you said what's technically possible, and I keep having the conversation with people in reverse, so to say, because people are like, what can we do with DRM? What are we limited by? And my answer is always, well, what do you want to do? Yeah. How do you want to present this to the viewer on what, you know, what are the rules in the sense of you have to be a subscriber, whatnot, but in the grand scheme of things, how do you want to do this? And let's make sure the technology fits the vision and the business model and what the viewers actually want, as opposed to saying, well, the technology can only do this, so let's just stick to that. Let's imagine. So we're talking about title of futurist. There has to be some sort of a Imagineer title too out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. Hey, I just want to have a little sidebar, Olga, because you had access to an Oculus, right? Was it to enjoy the Olympics for the bobsled event? Was that right?
It was. I watched figure skating and I watched hockey on the Oculus. And
so I think it's just worth sharing the experience because a lot of us have not had that experience.
If you can get your hands on an Oculus, Peggy and I were talking, I said, my mind is blown. Like obviously none of us could be in China to watch the Olympics, but being able to put on the Oculus and kind of sit around and first look to see that you're actually in the skating rink. And at some point you look around, you see people in the seats next to you, and it is a little bit weird when you look down and there's no body there, but you know, eventually. But just the feeling of being in a hockey stadium, hockey arena, and watching the game basically zoom in front of you. And the cooler part of it for me was my dad found out about this, and I said, if you want to see, come over. So he came over and I put the Oculus on him, and watching somebody else experience it, that was just completely wonderful. It's I can't even describe it. My father going, come on, score, what are you doing? Like he's really totally there. It was great. Very much.
I think I think when we talk about immersive experiences, right, I'm like, I don't know if I want to be having one of these kind of headsets on and everything, but I'm imagining that that's going to continue to evolve and they're going to figure out other ways in my lifetime.
You won't take it off, Peggy. You won't take it off.
Maybe that's it.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
I think we need to figure out. I think you forget at some point that it's on your head, like, because if your brain shifts to the, oh my God, there's a hockey game going on in front of me. Yeah, you kind of remember when you tilt your head forward and it slightly shifts and you're like, oh, wait, go back. But it's your brain forgets. And I think my opinion is it's still a pretty expensive device if you're buying it for the whole family, because obviously you need, if you have a family of 5, you can't just buy one, right? So I think if the prices of these devices keep coming down, that might have to be something more of a popular thing. But no, it was wonderful.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
I want to figure out how to monetize watching people use the Oculus, because that's almost more fun than actually wearing it. There's like a late night show in there somewhere.
All right, so that's going to be the same show that has dogs with little booties on. Because you're going to have people doing this, you're going to have dogs doing this. Trying to shake the boot off. Equally funny. So that's really interesting. So I'm just curious, I'm just going to shift gears a little bit here because I'm interested Christy, we were talking about metadata, and it's kind of the keys to the kingdom. Like we were joking, like when we talked earlier, or like I guess it was last week, we were all just chatting, and we were talking about, you know, like the scapegoat and the ugly stepchild, and we were trying to determine, like, is that DRM and what's metadata and whatnot. Like, to me, metadata is almost like the keys to the kingdom.
I certainly believe it is.
Because because
no,
like, if at every step of the media food chain, so whether it's in the editing and post-production aspects of things, or whether it's in the distribution and whatnot, and I know I'm generalizing at a super high level, it's just critical. And what I'm curious about with metadata is, so you think about, now you have 800 cameras, so that's 800 cameras worth of metadata and whatnot, is where artificial intelligence and machine learning start to come into play here. And I think it applies to everything that we're all talking about, but I feel like metadata may be at the center of all of that. What do you see coming in terms of how we manage metadata advances? I mean, it does become automated? Well, I know it's automated in some ways now, but
it is. There are still parts of the supply chain that are surprisingly fragile and a little bit air traffic control feeling today. But it's absolutely getting there. And I think the thing that's interesting is that I'd almost say it's more of like the map and the costumes of the kingdom. And clearly DRM is the keys to the kingdom. But I think this is really how do you map it all out? And there's so many dimensions to it. And I think that one of the really important pieces is just, especially as content is distributed through multiple business units within the same organization and is shared through licensing across multiple different businesses, how do you accurately identify that content? So whether it's initiatives like ITER or, de facto standards like Grace Note Nielsen, but how do you make that just kind of a no-brainer, that's just known infrastructure, which we're not quite there today, but we're pretty close, of accurately identifying anywhere this content shows up. What is it? How do you describe it? What's the set of images to properly display it? And then you can layer on top of that all the really cool stuff, like how do you do interactivity on top of that, or, map out on this particular device with these rights, you have access to these extra camera angles and all of that. So it's almost like you have an operating system level that's just the core infrastructure. And then you have all these great verticals that you can layer on top of that to both make a better consumer experience and hopefully even monetize that. Maybe you can upsell some of those features, or, and measure. How do you, if you have good metadata going out, then you can more accurately measure how the content's performing when it comes back, as opposed to being, I think that was episode 3, but so it's kind of on both the whole path through there, I think.
And I think we can take it even farther. We can go further back because we're adding more computing capacity at the video source. We're starting to pull out more telemetry, especially in live video, to say things like, like the lighting went down or something, or the sound went up. And we've been having a lot of discussions around what can you do with that, all this additional metadata that we can pull out of the actual video and the environment at the source, and what do you want to do with it? What could we do with it? So I think, there's lots of metadata that's coming together. And again, it goes back to creative product managers, advertisers, right? On what do you want to do with it? Lots of things we can do.
It certainly opens the door, in my mind, to tangential business models, right? Like it's not just the straightforward, I'm going to pay a ticket for this event. It's, I'm going to pay for access to this event, but now I want all this other flexibility around this event in terms of I want all the camera angles I can possibly get, or I want all the adjacent content I can possibly get, because so maybe it's what's going on the field, but then maybe it's all that statistical data that everybody has around all these type of events all the time anyway, or personality type information. Maybe it's even e-commerce opportunities associated with the event as well. So it becomes, it's just massive at the end of the day.
And the machine learning becomes really interesting when you have that rich set of data like Tricia's talking about, because you can also start mining for subtle ways to present the content to users, so you can look for patterns in that content, like we talked about, to get away from just describing it in a genre. You can look at really more interesting ways, and whether that's the true algorithmic all the way out to the consumer, or that's just tools that are enabling human editors. There's a whole range of ways to take that kind of machine learning and translate that into something that benefits the consumer and the product. So that's kind of interesting too, is, tools for editors versus actual algorithmic presentation.
Yeah, I know that some of the analytics companies out there are looking at things around the mood, or even what's going on in your world specifically. So getting it a little bit more personal. So Peggy's watching this particular program, and it's a rainy day, and it's a weekend day, and it's in the winter, But what does Peggy do in the summertime? Like, what is like on a Sunday in the summertime? Is she actually even watching anything? No, of course not. I'm outside somewhere. So I think it starts to get really interesting when you look at that.
But I have a question for you, Peggy. Do you want them to keep track of that, or does that become?
Well, I personally, so that's an interesting point. So that's a different type of data, right? And I personally would like it to be easier for me to manage my data settings on every service that I subscribe to, so that I can decide. So this is where I actually do appreciate what Apple's done with their devices, where now it's asking me if I want various apps to track my data, or can Apple track the data from my using that app? And my answer consistently has been no. I am not an open book with my data, but I know a lot of other people that honestly just don't really care. Like, oh, that's part of the deal. So it comes down to this conversation out there, even around the rise of AVOD and fast services versus SVOD, right? That will I trade watching an ad for a lower cost? So I think the same question is going to arise from a data perspective. Will I trade my personal data for a lower price? I personally will not, but
for entertainment, I'll be honest, I love watching TikTok. I do it. And you know what?
Okay.
Maybe my data is going all over the place, but there's a benefit to it, which I love my TikToks.
Okay, there you go.
That's a choice I made to trade off.
Yeah. No, that's a good question though. And I think it's very personal. Yeah.
Yeah, because I keep thinking about all the ads that you get. Like I don't know, subscribe to a service that sends me a cactus once a month. And the next thing I know, I am getting ads for, buy these plants, buy these plants, buy this plants. But for some reason, they're not aware of the fact that I actually subscribe to the service with the cactus.
And you already have the plant.
And they keep sending me ads for the cactus as well, until I actually go in and say, stop the stupid cactus ads. But with that said, I really don't want them to track me. I would rather get completely off the wall ads or no ads at all. I'm one of those people who would pay to not have to watch ads, especially when you accidentally end up watching the same ad for migraine medicine.
Oh, so this is really
17 times during the same TV show. I'd rather just not.
So the difference between advertising in a broadcast world and advertising in an online world is like, so I'm going to call out Hulu because it's the one that's been bugging me the most lately. I understand this is what they're mimicking advertising in the broadcast world. There's going to be this number of ad breaks during a half-hour program. I get it. I accept that. That's why I have the cheap subscription. But do I have to watch the same ad 7 times? And the ads online are a little bit more risque than the ads in broadcast. There's different standards. And I'm like, I'm not a man. I don't need that. And I don't know how to tell it that I don't need it. But there's this yin yang about how much data you're willing to share, or how much control. How do you control it? So I think there's a business opportunity. I've always thought this around DRM. They talked about, but back in the early 2000s, about like a DRM locker in the sky, right? So I would have my personal locker, and my locker would go with me. So even if I'm traveling internationally, well, that's still Peggy. That's still Peggy, and that's still Peggy's device. So she should be able to watch this content to the point we were talking about earlier. And maybe there needs to be a data preferences play as well around this. I don't know. Anybody want to go off and develop that business opportunity?
Well, there's an art to. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Christy.
I was just say there's an art to subtlety too, of like, even if you know excruciating detail about people, how you present it so it feels more natural and less repetitive, and adjusting your ad load for the number of spots you have and all of that. And I think that's an emerging area where people are trying to find that sweet spot on don't be creepy, don't show me the same ad 100 times, you know, and that we're sort of in the experimentation phase on a lot of that, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of laughed because, in fact, the whole concept of targeted, personalized advertising has been under discussion really since about the same time that streaming came around, right? And I would argue that it hasn't actually made a lot of progress. I know it's hard. I don't want to diminish how hard it is. And there's been a lot of really smart minds looking at it, but it is challenging, and it is annoying as a consumer. So what do we think the future of streaming looks like? I think we've talked a little bit about it being immersive. Is it gonna change dramatically? Are the devices around it gonna change? You know, what is it? I mean, there's so many different things that can change, but what do you think are some of the most important things you think are you going to see in the future?
I mean, there's two things that we're seeing. One is just streaming well beyond M&E.
Yeah.
The public sector, smart cities, fleet management, drones, you name it. You know, we've primarily been focused on M&E because, you know, that's where, you know, a lot of streaming has happened, especially to consumers, and we've all been part of that sort of growth in that area. But we're seeing just a huge explosion. This is streaming, right? A huge explosion in everything streaming, and it's interesting to even hear the. We joke about the chicken factory, where the chicken factory is going to be monitored, you know, have live streams over the chickens, and then when a chicken falls off or a little hook gets broken. It's this disgusting conversation, but you know, it alerts somebody and off they go. Right. So it's using all this really interesting video tech that was built, I think, primarily for M&E initially, and it's really moving into other markets. We're seeing that as a huge explosion. And in addition to that, as we talked about earlier today, just a lot of just smart video, it's smarter and smarter as in the sense of adding, whether it's more metadata, telemetry data, and making decisions along the way to trigger other things, whether it's an overlay or an ad or telling some other systems to do something else. So just really just smarter video actions, I guess, that we see that a lot. And just the more cameras, the amount of cameras that are coming online, it's incredible.
What about things like, I feel like there's we've talked about live streaming quite a bit. We've talked about the challenges of DRM and metadata and whatnot. How does that apply to the esports world? I'm really curious because this is such a growth area. I don't pretend to know a lot about esports, but I have nephews who just love it, right? And they've paid the ticket to go to the stadium before COVID and watch gamers compete and everything. And I think that's fascinating because I can't imagine sitting in that stadium watching gamers game, but that's because I'm not a gamer, right? I get why it's interesting to them. But there's also data out there that basically says, like, we talk about how much video data is being streamed across the internet right now, but that I think it's by 2026 that video gaming data is going to surpass entertainment, you know, video and whatnot. So how is that? I mean, I haven't really thought about what that all means from either a DRM or a metadata or anything perspective. But I kind of feel like that's that, and even sports betting. By the way, I'm getting really tired of the sports betting ads here in the New York area. Everybody can win big. But I I get it, because it's again, it's tangential to everything that we can do now. So
yeah, I mean, it's the esports, it's the sports betting, and all of that. It are different applications and segments. A lot of what we have here is that it's just sort of core technology, whether it's how you manage process metadata, how you protect who gets access to what, or how you ingest content into this ecosystem. These are just sort of core pieces of tech. And then what we do when we look at esports or sports betting or other markets, you're just saying, okay, what other standards do I need to consider? What does the infrastructure look like that we might have to tweak a little bit? What does the end user look like? We tweak a bit. So I think us as sort of like vendors and service providers to this market, we have a lot of the core understanding of how different video workflows work. And then we look at these new segments and there's always like a little tweak, you know, and a little
because at the end of the day for me, so at the end of the day for me, a stream is a stream is a stream. I don't care if it's dogs shaking their paws or gamers competing, you know, or what have you. At the end of the day, it's a stream. And the question then becomes who has the right to view it and how. Outside of that,
you don't care what the stream is. That's good.
Have at it. Enjoy, please.
But interesting with esports is it always goes back to the venues too. There's a lot of venues where those conferences and tournaments happen. And again, there's a lot of infrastructure being built out there. And we're always looking at that infrastructure to see, well, how can we make it easier to ingest more content so we can stream more content, segment it, pull more metadata, and again, get it back into the cloud so we can use all those great cloud tools to present it to end users. But yeah, that's a huge area of growth. It already is. I mean, esports, they're streaming.
Well, no, I mean, we've all read about the, e-gaming or e-gaming specific stadiums being built. So no, I'm not going to use Madison Square Garden in New York City. I'm going to go use this very specific, because it's been designed, infrastructure built, cameras aligned, all of that specifically to the needs. Interesting. So I want to take some time, because I think it's important, as International Women's Day is next Tuesday, March 8th. And kind of the theme of International Women's Day this year is break the barriers. So we kind of live in, there are many, many male dominated industries. This is just one of many, but, what's your journey been like in coming to the sector or coming to the roles that you're in today? Because we all learn from everybody. It doesn't matter male or female. We all learn from each other. We all learn from other experiences. We all learn from people around us, formal, informal mentors, people that we go, wow, they did something really cool over there. Maybe I can have that same behavior. I'm just curious, what was your path to where you are now? If whoever wants to jump in first.
We're all like, what?
Oh, you're all being really polite.
It's been a long journey, Peggy. I mean,
believe me, I get it.
Where do you want to start? I mean, you want to,
Well, I always call myself the accidentally in the tech industry, because I didn't go to college to be in the tech industry. I didn't know what technology was.
Yeah,
I mean, technology for me was a typewriter.
I started with radio advertising. I mean, that's where I started. And one of my agencies was building websites, and this was in about 1998, something like that. And I didn't know what a website was. I didn't know what a computer was. And my dad's, and he was offering me a job. And I said, you got to be crazy. I'm making all this money in advertising sales, radio. And my dad I told my dad the story. My dad's an engineer, and he said, if it has to do with a computer, take the job, do whatever you can do. Take
I love
it.
that.
And I went to Microsoft to sell websites. They were building these things I think they were called Blackview titles or something like that. I can't recall the tech. And the guy said to me, he said, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. Like, you don't know. And I said, I don't even have a computer. Okay. We're selling websites. And the guy said, Eddie Yip, and I'll never forget. And he said, Trish, just think about the end user experience. What's the thing that people are going to see or use? If you understand what that is, then you go back to the team and you can figure out how to do it. And I was like, this is a great idea. And we drew a picture of the website, what it was going to look like. Brilliant. And that was my start of my career. in tech, and I'm not an engineer, far from it. But I've always focusing on, one, you have different audiences that you need to talk to. So how to adapt and adjust, and staying focused on what's the end user experience? What's the core thing we're trying to do? And making sure I have a team of people around me that we're working together to make sure we're thinking about things from a coding perspective and operational and a cost perspective, et cetera. And I can help to package that. So that was kind of my journey, how I got into tech. And now I'm here, and I tend to like smaller, innovative kind of breakthrough technologies, which can be very tricky. You can time it off many times. Many times I think I've been too early, but I feel really good about this. Is my my favorite earlier stage technology companies I've ever worked for the reasons I brought up earlier. Which is the market is ready for it. There's all these sort of opportunities. As far as being a female in video tech, sure, there have not been a lot of women around us, and there have been times where it's been uncomfortable or weird. That's, I think we all kind of go, where I would always say, this is not a date, this is a meeting, It's been a little weirder journey, but, I personally try to just stay really focused on my outcomes. What are the outcomes? What are the things we're trying to achieve? What do they look like? Can I deliver them? And I've been lucky because I've had a lot of support from a lot of incredible mentors, CEO, and other people around me that have gotten me to where I am today. And I owe a lot to them. Anyway, that's how I got there. I don't know if that sort of answers the question, but
that's great.
Was it on purpose? No, absolutely not. I wanted to be an actress.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I love it.
I was going to make enough money in tech, and then I was going to be an actress. That was the plan. But
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. But it's never too late.
Maybe.
Wow. Christy, how about you? What was your path?
Let's see. So I actually did start in computer science from UC Santa Cruz. Go Slugs. And So I started as a developer. I absolutely loved like the blend of creativity and technical and instant gratification that you build something and it runs. But I was drawn to the end-to-end view of how everything fit together, especially in the video ecosystem that's so complex with so many stakeholders and moving parts. So I migrated into system architecture and integration and product strategy, and that evolved into a consulting business. And so, I was kind of fortunate that this is such a tight-knit community. It's such a great network, like Tricia mentioned, amazing mentors and really good friends and word of mouth. And so I've, been really lucky to work across a lot of different segments of the business. So whether it was, on the distribution side of DOCSIS and the original cable systems through content providers and ad sale versus ad buy side. And so it's kind of created a unique perspective. And now we have a small team that works with great partners like NBC Universal. So we get the benefit of working with really smart and fun people on meaty projects, but we can keep a sort of agile, small environment. So I feel really lucky that I get a little bit of best of both worlds there, that I get to be entrepreneurial, run my own team, but work with these amazing companies doing fun projects. So it was a fairly traditional tech background, but I mean, one thing I would say is I was first in my family to graduate from college, went through on financial aid, and I would absolutely encourage anyone out there, whether you don't feel like you can go into computer science because you're a woman and you're not into gaming or what you think computer science looks like, or because you don't think you have the money or whatever the reason, there's opportunities and there are just so many people who want to help along the way. So I think, ask for help, and almost always you'll find someone out there.
I love that. Olga.
See, I actually did go to school for exactly what I ended up doing. I not exactly intended to end up where I am today. Wasn't the grand scheme of things plan, but I did go to college. It was a SUNY upstate New York called Geneseo, and I ended up having a business management major with a computer science minor. I actually paid for 2 years of college writing COBOL programming, if anybody remembers what that was. And then just getting out of college, I just could not get a job that was in my field. Just I did not interview well. I was shy and ended up working at a bank as a secretary, where I, fortunately enough, met my business partner. And we had an idea in 2001 for a Netflix type company. 2 kids with no contacts in the industry whatsoever tried to do Netflix in 2001 and failed spectacularly. But what we did, the reason we went into that field is because we had, David, my business partner, had access to Microsoft's Windows Media DRM version 1, which is where the whole thing started to begin with. And when we realized we were totally failing, because we just couldn't get contact, we had to convince people that they need to give us, we decided to go the documentary route or independent film route. And we tried to convince people that they need to give us their movies so we can encode them and put them on the internet to sell. Think about convincing people that in 2001, right? So we eventually spun off into what we are now today, a tech company, just offering this one very specific service. And it's actually interesting because, we talked about, talking how we got here in the first place in our pre-call, and literally the next day, a company reached out to us. Their business is to record various people in STEM talking about not their career, but how they got there. What to do or things you need to think about, not trying to sell being a rocket scientist, but actually say how you got there and what you did. And they're also wanting to record different people talking about it. So women,
that's interesting.
Different people of different colors and everything else that they can, as much variety as they can get. And so that kids in today's world in high school can see, and they say, oh, I want to be a mathematician, but I am, a white female. I don't know a single white female mathematicians. Oh, wait, no, here's a woman. And here's how she got there. Yeah. And I think that is such an amazing project.
I think that's a fabulous project, actually. That's really good.
And these guys are talking about the fact that you're starting out, they're not fully comfortable, they don't have the money. I'm like, done. Don't even need to sell it to me. We will help you out because I think that would just be wonderful.
I think that's fabulous. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, I love that. Another great organization is the Gina Davis Media Institute on Gender and Media. And their slogan is, if she can see it, she can be it. And it's just, it's so powerful and so true.
Yeah, I think all of these.
And I think that's what these guys are trying to do, but more on not just the woman, but everybody. Because in the world of, I'm currently in Denver at Mile High Video, and it is very much a white male dominated situation. And it's hard to break into that. Very hard to break into that.
Love that.
No, I know. For me, I was a poli-sci undergrad, and then I kind of came in sideways to working for one of the big tech companies. And my tech career was navigating my way around this very large tech company for 20 odd years. And then saying, I kind of like this media sector, which was the last part of my career at that big tech company. And then saying, I think there's a business in this outside of the tech world, so I can get a little work-life balance. And then I can also be more diverse in the type of work that I do, because I can work with lots of different types of media tech companies. So that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last 14 years, is just helping other companies. What's their message? How do they go to market? How do they differentiate themselves in the market? Who are their competitors? Why are they better? Why are they worse? But always working with men. Every single one of us here has probably been the only woman in the room many, 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 many times.
Actually, I had a project where I walked into a room mentally preparing myself that I'm about to pitch our services to a whole bunch of men. And I was shocked. There was not a single man in the room. The head of player development was a woman. Partner contact was a woman. The head of encoding was a woman. And there were 7 of us. And we kind of looked around and we're like, oh, this is cool. Let's get this done.
That would have been a great selfie.
And that was, it's a project that went live, and it's a project that is doing really well. And it was completely amazing to see a group of women. And we did talk about the fact that it is interesting, and they've all had this conversation where somebody said to them, oh no, I need to talk to a man. And it's kind of painful to hear, but
yeah,
beautiful project running right now.
Just move past it, right? I mean, that's just the thing. You just move past those moments and keep your eye on what's ahead.
Yeah.
So, well, I think I'm gonna let us close on that note. I just really want to thank each of you for making the time today to join this really great conversation. I really love talking to women about like what's just going on across the industry and how they fit and what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you for having us, Peggy.
Thank you.